I am Chief Engineer Krishnan Ramesh from the Marine Engineering Department, and today I wish to deliver a lecture on marine boilers. So let's start with what a boiler is basically. You guys would have already seen a boiling vessel in a tea shop. That is just boiling water. So in the ship, we have a marine boiler basically to generate steam. So now the next question is, why do you need steam? Well, steam is used for a lot of purposes on board the ships. Let's name a few purposes what they are used for. To begin with, you are using heavy oil, which is the fuel used to propel the ships or run the engine. So this heavy oil has a very high viscosity of about it has to be heated to a temperature of 140 degrees roughly to bring it thin. So it is not able to flow if you do not heat the oil. So the point is you need a heating medium to bring down the viscosity of this oil. So that's one of the main reasons why the steam is produced on board the ship by using a boiler, so that the temperature of the oil comes to as high as 140 degrees and it can be used to burn in the engine. Well, talking of the other uses on board the ships, there are other lots of uses, but to name a few, to giving hot water for accommodation purposes, in the galley for preparation of foodstuff, on the deck, lots of uses you may have. In the engine room itself, you may have a direct steam outlet taken from each of these taps where you can take direct steam, supersaturated steam. So there are so many uses on board, but to generally let you know that there is no ship without a boiler. Every ship needs a boiler. Okay, now let's go to the next step of what are the kinds of boilers. Basically, there are two kinds of boilers. One is a fire tube boiler, the other is a water tube boiler. Now let's see what the differences are. Fire tube boiler, as the name itself suggests, the fire or the exhaust gas or the flue gas passes through the tube. Now you may ask me what these tubes are for. Well, one medium to have a heat transfer should pass through so that the other medium is able to heat it. So in the case of a fire tube boiler, you will have a big container and you will have the fire or the exhaust gases passing through the container, so that the water which is situated or surrounded outside the tubes get heated in due course and produce steam. Now this steam gets collected in the steam drum right on the top. So from there the steam is taken out to various purposes what you want to use it for. Now the next one is a water tube boiler. The water is inside the tubes. As again the earlier one was a fire tube where the fire was inside or the exhaust gas was inside. In the water tube boiler, the water happens to pass through the tubes and the fire is outside. That is the only difference. Now these are the two different designs of how the boiler is. The concept is the same, generating steam to use for these purposes what I already mentioned, and how they are produced also I've just told you, and basically they are used for generation. Now the different kinds of fire tube boilers are, one is a Cochrane boiler. Very initially we know something what is called as a Scotch boiler. Now the Scotch boiler is also a fire tube boiler, but it is a horizontal boiler. Now you may wonder, in the ships, if you have lots of machineries in a horizontal position, there is not enough space. Space is a very big constraint. You may have a headroom in the ship. So the first and foremost idea, or what is normally there on board, if you put your foot, you may see that all the machineries, most of them are in the vertical position. So boiler being also a very big machine is preferred to be in the vertical position right on the upper platform. So the Scotch boiler was the first basic boiler which was brought about in the industry, but it failed to so many reasons by not bringing it or making it popular in the ship. So in the ship, to start with, you have the Cochrane vertical fire tube boiler. That is one of the most common boilers which is there on board, and it produces steam by heating the water. As I told you, it is the exhaust gases passes through the tube because it's a fire tube and the water is outside. So obviously the steam gets collected on the steam drum which is there on the top. From the steam drum, you have got the master steam stop valve, through which once you open the valve, the steam gets out of the steam drum and gradually goes to a intersection or a manifold wherein which you have different segregations or different areas to where you want to lead it to. Well, you have the port side and the starboard side manifold, and in the port side is normally called as the left side and starboard side is the right side on board the ship. That is how you normally mention. So on either side you have got the manifold and where you have the valves, and these valves are leading the steam from the steam drum to wherever you want it to. Well, you may have so many bunker tanks, or you may have so many fuel oil tanks inside the engine room or outside. Now these these tanks are having the fuel oil, which is the primary source for running the engine. So this steam needs to go all the way to the front. The bunker tanks are situated right in the front of the ship, and this steam passes through pipelines and it leads right to the front of the ship, wherein which it heat transfers, and obviously the steam returns back from there, partly as condensed distilled water. Now I forgot to tell you what water is being used. It is not normal water, it is basically distilled water, which is having 0 ppm of salt. The water what we have here probably has about 100, 200, even go to thousands. Now boiler, the water is very, very, very important to maintain high quality or high purity. That means there should not be any salt content. You may ask me why? Because if you have salt content, the water starts to boil, salt gets separated and salt gets deposited as a crust on the tubes or on the walls or all over inside the boiler, and that becomes a very big problem because metal, salt, it forms a crust and ultimately it can lead to cracks. So this water is produced normally using a fresh water generator, which is nothing but a machine again, which uses the waste heat from the main engine to rather produce distilled water. So I don't want to go into the finer details of how the freshwater generator works, because my subject of discussion today is only about the boilers, and we need the water, especially distilled water, which is produced using the freshwater generator. Well, this is all for today. I can tell you about a brief introduction what I gave you now. In the future, I will probably discuss more in detail about the Cochrane boiler, and also talking about the different kinds of the mountings which are there on the boiler. What are the mountings, why they are needed, and most importantly about the boiler survey. Thank you.